once again, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, based on where you are. Again, my name is Rufaro Maunze-Bebe, and I will be your host for this afternoon. Thank you for joining us yet again. We're very pleased and honored that you've taken the time out to join us for this very important discussion on gas. I will briefly just talk you through what the agenda is going to be for today before handing over to our Executive Director from REN21, Rana. But before we get into that, we're going to do a very quick poll just to get a perspective in terms of where everybody's position is. My colleague Asiya is going to put up the poll just now. And the question is, does gas have a future in Africa's energy mix? Thank you for those that have already completed the poll. So far, 81% have said yes, there is a place for gas in Africa's energy mix, and 19 of you disagree. Thank you very much to everybody that shared. I'm looking forward to unpacking these responses a little bit more as we go through the afternoon. Without much further ado, I would like to introduce Rana Adib. She's the Executive Director of REN21, and she will talk us through, she will frame the conversation for us and facilitate our keynote speaker and our group discussion. Thank you, Rana, and welcome.
I would like to welcome all of you. Thanks a lot, Rufaro, for the introduction, and also for having women voices in music. I think especially in a day where we have a very male panel, I'll be honest, and this was certainly not our intent, but I'm still very much looking forward to have the discussion and invite basically the women participants even more to take on the opportunity to step up on the stage later with our panelists and participate in the discussion. So why are we doing this? So maybe very quickly, on REN21, we're a community of players from different perspectives. So governments, industry associations, NGOs, and research and academia. And this already showed that there is a variety of perspectives, and that we are actually not fearful about having discussions that are not always easy to have. And this is exactly what the RENdez-vous is about. It is about having a space where we can bring different perspectives, different voices together to agree, disagree, but exchange with each other, and probably also identify common ground of understandings. Now, in this Africa series, why did we decide to have a rendezvous on natural gas? The reality is, especially in the context of the European taxonomy, for instance, but in general, in the whole context about how does climate affect, or climate mitigation, is it a topic for the African continent? What are other driving topics? Development, job creation, energy access, economic opportunities. We have seen that obviously natural gas is a very hot topic. And we felt that even though we're a renewable energy network, we really need to have the discussion where we're bringing these different systems and voices together. So I think we are really, I'm very delighted to have a great panel here, and we will, however, start to frame the discussion with a presentation of Charles Nyirahuku. I hope that I pronounced it correctly, Charles, from the African Development Bank. Charles is a Chief Gas Regulatory Officer at the African Natural Resource Center, which is hosted at the African Development Bank, and will kick us off with a lightning talk. We'll then have a panel discussion, but I really invite everybody to already listen in, have your opinions, use the chat function, but also take later the opportunity to step up, come forward, raise your hands, and show your face and participate in the discussion. So we'll start off with Charles, and I look forward to learn more about your thoughts on this, Charles, about natural gas on the African continent in the energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rana. I'm really delighted to be part of this conversation. I think this is quite an exciting conversation on the role of the renewables and natural gas in the energy transition. And as you have just said, this provides us with a platform to hear voices with different perspectives regarding the role of natural gas. I will start with the broader principle which should guide this discussion. by saying that addressing climate risks and supporting economic development are part of the same equation. So in essence, the energy transition should be equitable and fair, with no one left behind. So when you look at the title, it suggests that natural gas can complement renewable energies in driving the energy transition, as many African leaders believe. And I'm sure some of our friends in the panel and even the audience have a similar view. But I think what is important for us is to articulate strong arguments to put through this idea of the complementary role of natural gas and renewables in the energy transition. So let me share with you in the following slides some thoughts. I will start with the concept of climate justice and how this is being used in the framework of Africa's narrative about climate change. In 1992, a coalition of low-income countries successfully advocated for the UN's climate mitigation pathways to include their rights to development and a common but differentiated responsibility to address the dual problems of development and climate change. So this is quite technical, but you can see that the principle I've just outlined before about development and climate are recurring. So this language has long been the basis of equity considerations in climate policy, including in the 2015 Paris Agreement. So if I can put it briefly, I can say that the Paris Agreement expects deeper emissions cuts from developed countries based on their respective capabilities. So which means that developed countries should decarbonize faster and bear most of the responsibility in addressing climate change. But what does it mean for Africa? We know that the Africa historic contributions to greenhouse gases has been minimum at just 0.5%. And the annual contribution of Africa is less than 5%. But despite its low carbon footprint, Africa bears the brunt of climate impacts, and this will increase with impact estimated at 1.5 higher than the global average. So what does it mean for Africans? I think the focus for African, we have just said, is about how do we adapt to the climate change rather than how do we mitigate the emissions. This is really the center of the core of the discussion. On the other hand, when you look at the African as a continent and more broadly the global south, you see that they are most vulnerable to climate shocks. Africa, for instance, stands to lose about 20% of its GDP due to extreme temperature rise. And adapting to climate change could cost the continent $50 billion annually by 2050. And there is a big sense that climate change, climate shocks threatens to derail Africa's development gains. So therefore, placing climate change mitigation and Africa's development in opposition is not the way to go. So As with its development plans, Africa's response to climate change must be Africa-led. And I hope that this discussion really will help us frame a common vision about an African-led climate change pathway. So I'll show you a slide which you will be able to see when you join and get a chance to download the slide, where you have the top emitting countries, which are Canada, the United States, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Belgium, and so on the top of the list. And on the bottom of the list, the low emitters, which are, let's say, Ghana, Sri Lanka, Kenya, Senegal, and Guyana. So you have this discussion that these top emitting countries which are still investing in fossil fuels, pushing the low emitters to switch away from gas, and without offering any viable alternatives. So this has raised hot debates within African communities. So coming back to Africa's development needs, I think all of us here in the room, we are much aware of the development challenges Africa is facing. I've put a slide showing Africa's night skyline. When you look the continent from the satellite, you take a picture, you will see that most of Africa is in the darkness. And that is only because the energy poverty in Africa is staggering. It's really something which is unparalleled on the globe, with half of the continent with no access to electricity. Over 900 million Africans don't have access to modern cooking technologies, just for simple cooking and eating. So the core of Africa's development agenda is to provide access to a stable, affordable energy, which can contribute to raising the living standards of the continent to match with the global average and promote industrialization. So this is to put in context how much electricity Africa needs. Just imagine that Africa, the average African, uses 200 kilowatt hour per annum, which is equivalent to an average American fridge annual consumption. So you just can imagine, how much Africa need to grow to be able to catch up with the global average. In terms of the use of fertilizers, on average, sub-Saharan Africa uses around 20 kgs of fertilizers per hectare, less than 1/7 of the rate used in high-income countries. So basically, the way we're saying here is that we are coming really from a very, very low base. And if we want to catch up with the global average, Africa's GDP will need to increase 16-fold. So 16 times to what it is today by 2100. So let me move quick tackling the short-term role of gas. I think this is the key question which we need to address here. But the advocates of a just transition argue that applying the same aggressive decarbonization pace to the continent as adopted, by the developed world would place the continent at a disadvantage. And accordingly, they make a very strong argument that Africa should be well positioned to claim an entitlement to exploit its fossil fuels resources, but to the limits of the remaining carbon budget, leaving the burden of mitigation to high-emitting countries. In other words, what these advocates of a just transition for Africa are saying is, we can still be able to use our fossil fuels without really affecting significantly the current level of emissions already in the atmosphere. And I remember there was a calculation which was done by Energy Growth Hub, that if we were to triple the energy generation in Africa using only natural gas, the additional greenhouse gas emission which will be emitted will be just 1% increase. So really meaning that there is a room for the continent to use its resources without really putting the planet on unsustainable pathways. So what will be the role of natural gas? I think Lara has framed it starting this discussion. I think there should be a broad thinking about how we treat natural gas based on the discussion which, the precedent which was set by the EU Parliament when discussing the taxonomy of natural gas, aiming to put a green fuel label to natural gas so that there can be investment into the sector. Similarly, I think for African, natural gas can be treated or labeled as a transition fuel, but within very clear and defined context. It should be clear that the benefits of natural gas should be assessed, and we should make sure that the benefits outweigh its economic risks of asset stranding. We need also to ensure that when natural gas is proposed for power generation, that is to address high electricity costs or where there is absence of cheaper energy alternative, including renewables. There also a need also to assess whether any new gas development project is aligned with national determined contributions for the country and long-term national strategies. If all these set of criteria are met, and there can be a strong case to show that really using natural gas is beneficial for economic development, for creating jobs, and so on, then I think there will be a strong case to label natural gas as a transition fuel. Now, the benefit of natural gas as transition fuels are numerous. I think all of us would agree that natural gas really is abundant across the continent. It really can help integrate the deployment of intermittent wind and solar energy, because we know that wind doesn't blow every time, and sun doesn't shine in the night. So yes, that's where natural gas can come in to support the integration of these intermittent renewable energies. Natural gas also can provide a modern and cleaner fuel, for instance, for cooking. You know that in Africa, most of African population use cut trees, for cooking. So this will really allow also to save a lot of trees. You know that natural gas also is a vital input into nitrogen-based fertilizers, and that's can contribute to feeding around half of the world's population. And finally, gas can address needs in hard to abate emissions. For instance, you know, in the current state of technology, for steel production, cement production, petrochemical, and so on, the only way you can use this product, you can manufacture this product is through the use of natural gas. So yes, we believe that natural gas has a role to play in Africa's energy transition, but within a certain context and for a specific time frame, because there is a strong scientific evidence that we really need to ultimately move away from fossil fuels and promote renewables. But I think while we have that in mind, we need also to remind ourselves that given its low greenhouse gas emissions and its prevalent energy poverty, Africa must be given a carbon space and a planning horizon to define optimal transition pathways, which balances its socio-economic transformation aspirations within a sustainable development framework. So on this note, I would like to thank the panel and the audience for your attention, and I'm happy to start discussing and engaging on this very interesting topic. Thank you.
I think you have brought up many interesting points. What I would like to highlight is this differentiation between short-term and long-term. What does transition mean? Not only the energy uses of natural gas, but also the material, industrial, agriculture uses of natural gas, because I think this is where we also see that the energy discussion is very much dissociated often of the material uses. And then very clearly this context setting in the climate context and the view, I guess, like there are questions also on climate finance, development finance behind this. And the need for an African perspective. Here I would like, before moving to the panel discussion, ask you a question. We speak very often about, okay, how do we have an African perspective on the energy transition, which is, as was mentioned in the chat, actually not only transition because we need to build up energy infrastructure. The reality when it comes to natural gas is that not all African countries are natural gas or oil exporting countries. It's only a couple of them. The reality also is that much of this gas is exported outside of the continent. And I was wondering to what extent, I found it really interesting to see like the indicators that would allow to determine whether we go for this natural gas or not and exploit it and use it, would also comprise for you, from your view, an indicator on local value creation and local uses, continental uses. What are your thoughts on this?
Thank you very, very much, Rana, for this very, very good contributions. Definitely, local value creation and value addition on the continent are really one of the key criteria, you know, we in that taxonomy, when we talk about the taxonomy for natural gas as a transition fuel. The reason being that the whole narrative is that we need natural gas for Africa's development. It's not for exporting emissions to countries which are already responsible for 85% of the carbon emission. So if there is any remaining carbon budget allowed for African, this should be used towards African economic development and local value creation is really at the core of this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
The short-term and the long-term horizon is also something quite important, because when we talk about energy transition, it is a process, taking into account that the clean technologies, which let's say solar with batteries, hydrogen, electrical vehicle, and so on, are not yet deployed at a market scale, and most of these technologies are extremely costly, are not affordable even for rich countries. You see, Europe, for instance, the energy mix coming from renewables is only 20%. And how do you expect African countries, for instance, to adopt electrical vehicles where they don't even have sufficient energy for a fridge or for a microwave or for air conditioning? So it means that there needs to be the time factor has to be considered. And when we talk about net zero by 2050, it's some horizon we're talking about. But for Africa, this horizon may be very difficult to achieve because we are coming from a lower base.
Thank you very much.